Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Views of an Outsider, The Outsider's View from June 21st. If you want to keep up with everything that's going on in the world, but you don't want to drag down your entire life by listening to the news every day, then get the main stories right here once a week, and spend the rest of your time actually living your best life. Let's get right into it. Police in New York City had to make several dozen arrests as celebrations of the Knicks NBA championship victory turned violent, which left police busily responding to both shootings and stabbings in the Big Apple. I'm just going to say it bluntly. I really don't get you people. I try. But seriously, when you lose a sports game, you beat up people on the streets for nothing more than wearing a different team's jersey, you climb lampposts like chimpanzees, and you rip trees out of the ground like a loon on a roid rage-fueled rampage and throw them at people like you think that you're the Incredible Hulk or something. And then, even when you win, you stab people and go on a shooting spree. As Michael Jordan would say, stop it. Get some help. In the meantime, police arrested more than 60 people that night, in addition to responding to at least 4 stabbings and 1 shooting, as thousands of people flooded into the streets to celebrate their team's first championship in more than half a century. According to the New York Post, at least 10 members of the NYPD were injured in the resulting violence, including one officer who was hit with a glass bottle. Dramatic video of the scene was, of course, circulating on social media. That video captured the mayhem for the entire world to see, including rioters setting fire to school buses before firefighters were finally able to put out the flames. What is wrong with you people? Barstool Sports posted, "It's absolute anarchy in New York City." Other videos supported that claim as they captured loud flashing bangs, illegal fireworks, fans destroying street vehicles, and lighting other objects on fire in those same streets. And you wonder why your city is the way it is, crime-ridden and growing poorer as all legitimate businesses leave. That couldn't possibly have anything to do with your own mindless, self-destructive behavior, the carnage and rubble of which you have to live in. But to be fair, not everyone preferred violence and destruction under the guise of celebration. One clip that went viral showed thousands of people in the streets and hanging from apartment buildings singing Jay-Z's Empire State of Mind. In the places where it wasn't violent, the exalted energy was unapologetic, and for Knicks fans, their triumph was expressed both on the streets and online as well. But not all online movements are organic, despite the facade. In less than 1 year, a massive movement has appeared out of nowhere on Facebook, opposing data centers of all things, which have surged into prevalence across this country alongside the explosion of artificial intelligence. This very non-organic group that is clearly trying to manipulate and move public opinion with sheer volume is called Say No to Data Centers. And it was first created in September of 2025. That recently. And now it supposedly has more than 170,000 members among the easily led. But once again, to be fair, This group is also filled with average Americans who are asking reasonable questions about water use, property values, and utility rates. But an investigation by the Daily Wire uncovered that the group's grassroots energy is being artificially channeled by Democrat operatives at organizations that are funded by George Soros. And they openly state that their purpose is to turn local frustration and fear of data centers into votes for the left, based on candidates who will run on these mostly manufactured issues. Apparently, the man at the heart of this is George Durart of Beverly Hills, California. In fact, he is designated within this massive online group as one of 5 so-called group experts, where he presents himself as an expert in maps and navigation apps. He is also the creator of Powered by Who, which is this movement's most sophisticated tool, a national database that is tracking 2,299 data center projects in 46 different states, mapping their corporate and political money and packaging it all within a community toolkit about how to stop each vital project. In fact, Durart shares map info with this anti-data center Facebook group almost daily, and he claims that the project is funded solely by its readers. He also claims that Powered by Who is an extremely technically sound, research-intensive project that is all carried out only because of his personal commitment to opposing and stopping data centers. But what Durart doesn't ever tell his Facebook group about is his day job, funny enough. Hypocritically, Durart is the director of digital research and AI strategy at Upswing Research and Strategy, which is a political consulting firm in Washington, D.C., a political consulting firm with a client list that includes nearly every single Democrat campaign committee, including the DNC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, and the Democratic Governors Association. Upswing's client list also includes a wide range of progressive organizations that are directly involved in the opposition to AI data centers, such as the Center for American Progress, the Working Families Party, and the leftist activist group Indivisible. Meanwhile, one of the other 5 group experts leading this supposedly grassroots Facebook group is another political operator, Mark Schlossberg, who is a senior advisor at Food and Water Watch, FWW, which is a group in Washington that is demanding that Congress halt all new data center construction. Schlossberg claimed in a statement to the Daily Wire that neither FWW nor its affiliated PAC has a role with this Facebook page. But according to Power the Future, the FWW is the anti-data center campaign's chief political quarterback, and it receives its funding almost entirely through anonymous, donor-advised funds, conveniently enough. China! Sorry. And this isn't their first rodeo. The shadily funded FWW's affiliated PAC Food and Water Action, has backed Democrat candidates almost exclusively. In 2024, it supported Kamala Harris plus 3 Democrat congressional candidates and 1 Working Families Party candidate. That same year, this group also ran Get Out the Vote operations in Pennsylvania, a swing state where Food and Water Watch has also organized opposition to the development of data centers, which they're supposedly not involved with when it comes to this Facebook group, just everywhere else. The fingerprints of a national political party machine are all over the central nervous system of this suddenly sprung up anti-data center movement. And no doubt, most of the average people that have found themselves involved in the cause of this campaign don't even know that they are being manipulated and used by major politicians like pawns in a chess game to see who ends up controlling the world based on who wins the AI race, which is going to take place whether you participate in it or not, because you can't stop these centers from being built in other countries. Duarte himself bragged on LinkedIn that his project has actually become a voter registration machine for liberals in swing states like Ohio, Michigan, and Wisconsin. A very weird victory for someone whose role in the Facebook group is supposedly to be their maps and navigation expert, not their voter registration expert. Duarte told the Daily Wire that Powered by Who is an independent, personal project that he built himself, and that the political firm that he just happens to work for, Upswing, plays no role in it at all. But Indivisible, another client of Upswing, the leftist activist network, best known for bankrolling the No Kings protests, is now among the most active funded organizers in the anti-data center fight, coincidentally enough. In fact, Indivisible has been a driving force behind data center fights nationwide, including an April week of action in Temple, Texas, complete with a City Hall protest and a council recall, scripted phone banks in central Indiana, and anti-data center rallies from Massachusetts to California. The American Energy Institute has also tracked this group funding similar activity across Ohio, Virginia, Indiana, Georgia, and California. The grants database of the Open Society Foundations, which is George Soros's $32 billion philanthropic attempt to covertly control much of what goes on in politics and thus control the world in a very real way through money. It shows more than $7.6 million flowing from George Soros to Indivisible, $3 million of which was earmarked for nebulous social welfare activities? Is that what you call it? The American Energy Institute tracked another $1 million in 2025 going to Indivisible from the Burger Action Fund, which is the advocacy vehicle of the Swiss billionaire Hans-Jörg Weiss. And that is all backed up by the fund's own tax filings. Weiss is notorious for donating to radical left groups, such as the 1630 Fund, which in turn is a notoriously massive financial sponsor and dark money hub for far leftist causes of all kinds. Weiss has even been investigated by the Federal Election Commission for allegations of illegally funneling millions of dollars of his foreign Swiss money into U.S. elections through a network of left-wing nonprofits. That FEC complaint was later dismissed. However, it should be noted that foreign nationals are barred only from funding U.S. elections directly, but money that they route and launder through a nonprofit advocacy group remains legal. A loophole allowing for foreign interference in our country, and one that conservatives have spent years in Congress trying to close. Guess who wants it to be left open? And no wonder. The American Energy Institute racked up more than $39 million in foreign money that was then sent flowing to 12 different organizations that are all very active in opposing data center development. This movement is foreign, not American, and it's no mystery why foreigners would want us to be out of competition in the AI race that will determine who controls the world, and like I said before, will happen whether we participate or not. The Working Families Party, the same radical left-wing party that helped elect Zoran Mandani to office in New York City with the $23.7 million in funding that came from George Soros, is also one of Upswing's clients. The WFP has also publicly urged critics of data centers to run for office in order to convert the feelings about data centers into votes for the far left. Currently, that party is recruiting data center opponents to be their candidates in Northern Virginia, the Upper Midwest, and in the Southwest, where they intend to use this issue as a mask to disguise their far-left intentions for what they will do with power once they have it. WFP's National Press Secretary, Ravi Mangala, even told Wired, quote, "You can't fill a community center or a town hall just organically." The bottom line is that the same small circle of Democrat firms, far-left billionaire donors, foreign globalists, and radical organizers resurface at every single layer of an anti-data center movement that presents itself as being grassroots Americana. And most of the people in this movement probably do honestly believe that. The 170,000 members of Say No to Data Centers were never told that their group expert gets his daily paycheck from a key Democrat firm. And even without knowing that, some people within this Facebook group have not welcomed the increasingly partisan political tone. Earlier this year, one woman posted in the group that it seemed to be losing track of its own core focus on the data center issue, responding to a string of purely political posts inside the group by posting back, "Are we supposed to be making political posts in here or stay on topic about AI data centers?" A good question. And here's another one. If you know the kind of agendas that George Soros and his ilk have funded, both here and in Europe, do you really want to let them use and hijack your feelings about data centers to put their henchmen into power in office? Because you know what they are going to do once they're in power. The record of Soros-funded DAs and policies that have only survived because of his money is a very clear, entirely dysfunctional record that points directly to societal collapse if it is not gone to war with and eradicated. You can feel however you feel about data centers. But if you allow your feelings on that one issue to be harnessed to put even a single Soros candidate into office, you are slitting your own wrists to the degree that data centers are not even going to make it onto the list of things that you are trying to survive. And speaking of causes that have been heavily funded by George Soros, let's turn to illegal immigration next. It turns out that an illegal foreigner from the Congo was apparently working as a cop in Maine before he was recently nabbed by ICE. The Department of Homeland Security told the Daily Wire that Billy McLaurent Basikasa Bonguera was arrested by immigration on June 9th after he abused our generosity by overstaying his short-term student visa by more than a decade. On top of that, Bonguera also had a history of committing crimes while he was here. He was arrested in 2019 for domestic violence, but according to law enforcement sources, prosecutors ultimately declined to file charges against him. Probably prosecutors that were funded by Soros, based on the record in most instances like this. According to the Portland Press-Herald, Cumberland County's district attorney, Jacqueline Satoris, claimed that her office didn't proceed with the case merely because there wasn't any physical contact during the alleged assault, despite the allegations that Bonguera did throw something at his female victim. So, to be clear, he was let off for trying to assault a woman just because he had poor aim while doing so. After that, the same police department, Cumberland County's Sheriff's Office, hired Bonguera in August of 2024 after conducting, quote, the same comprehensive background screening and rigorous vetting process that it does on every officer in the department. And yet, their comprehensive and rigorous screening conveniently missed the very basic fact that he was here illegally. And all that they had to say for themselves for letting a foreign criminal police us was, while he has been employed, he has been a valued member of our team with no discipline issues. He has demonstrated dedication to his duties and often works overtime. Well, whoop-de-frickin-do. Here is the history. According to DHS, Bonguera came to the United States on November 15th, 2015, on a generous student visa, which expired on December 4th, 2015. He was only supposed to be here for a couple of weeks. Due to his illegal status ever since overstaying his visa, he was supposed to leave on a flight in 2017, as he had been ordered to do, but he again never boarded the plane, according to law enforcement sources. A Homeland Security spokesperson stated he refused to depart the country in violation of our laws. This criminal, illegal alien will remain in ICE custody pending removal proceedings. Meanwhile, the ongoing mass deportation effort to remove illegals has regularly exposed a trend of police departments employing law-breaking foreigners to police the law-abiding people whose home they broke into against their will, instead of just coming around to the front door as told so that we could properly vet you. To give only a few examples of this, ICE officers caught Jean-Luc Evans, an illegal from Jamaica, in July of 2025 when he was attempting to buy a gun, which he is not legally allowed to have here as an illegal. A gun that he was illegally trying to buy for his role as a police officer with the Old Orchard Beach Police Department in Maine. In January, ICE also arrested Larry Tama, an illegal from Cameroon, who was accused of fraud, and yet was just 1 week away from graduating from the New Orleans Police Academy, according to Fox News. That department said that they learned that Larry Tama had a deportation order after he applied to be an officer with them. And yet it still took ICE showing up to arrest him before they stopped moving forward. In October, they also arrested Raul Bojovic, an illegal from Montenegro, who was already working as a police officer for the Hanover Police Department in Illinois. A rogue judge later granted Bojovic a $2,500 immigration bond, and he returned to work with the Hanover Police Department, where he has been working ever since, continuing to police Americans as a foreign lawbreaker. But as big of a problem as that whole situation and illegal immigration in general is, this week we had even bigger issues. So now, let's get down to Iran. The latest chapter in that saga started when one of Iran's drones shot down a U.S. Army Apache helicopter. According to the president's call with the Fox News correspondent Trey Yingst, the Iranian drone struck the helicopter but failed to detonate, lodging itself between the two pilots as they were flying at low altitude. So now they were flying a gunship with a live explosive in the form of a burning drone that was embedded in the cockpit with them, and the pilots were facing the possibility of an explosion at any moment. Eventually, the crew managed to ditch their aircraft into the sea. Then the two pilots were thankfully subsequently rescued in a historic first-of-its-kind rescue by an unmanned sea drone. After the Iranian drone attack, Trump warned them that he was nearing a decision to order strikes on Iranian power plants and bridges amid the stalled nuclear negotiations and amid escalating attacks on our troops by Iran. Only the night before this drone attack, U.S. fighter jets struck Iranian radar systems and air defense sites in response to ceasefire violations, which we will circle back around to, and on the grounds that Iran had reportedly attempted to rebuild its defensive capabilities during the pause in hostilities, which was a red line that was explicitly prohibited under the terms of the ceasefire. Those overnight strikes were described as being highly effective. The partial reconstruction that had apparently taken place represented a very small percent of its original capacity so far, and apparently U.S. forces did destroy roughly 55% of even that minor rebuilt capability. These attacks, in response to ceasefire violations by Iran, had to do with the fact that Iran had fired missiles at the U.S. forces that are stationed in Kuwait, at the forces stationed in Bahrain, and at the forces stationed in Jordan, attacks which prompted threats of American military action in response. The dual pressure of military strikes, coupled with explicit threats of further escalation, was meant to make Tehran understand that we were not backing down from our stand, that their nuclear program had to go. Then last Sunday, a deal was announced, but the details were not. As Ben Shapiro said at the time, President Trump says we have a deal with Iran, an amazing deal for us and our allies. The Iranians say they have a deal with the United States, the worst possible deal for them and their allies. You know who doesn't have the deal? Any of us. We do not have words. We do not have the text. I'm not about to take anybody's word for it when there's clearly no solid information for any of us to look at. Then he added, what would a good long-term deal look like? Let's point out that nothing that's going on right now is a long-term deal. What we have right now is called a Memorandum of Understanding. Supposedly, it is a 60-day Memorandum of Understanding, which is kicking the can down the road because none of the major issues have been solved in this Memorandum of Understanding. Let's talk about what a great deal would look like for the United States, according to the administration's list. No nuclear weapons or development of facilities. No ballistic missile development. No funding of terror apparatus abroad. And opening the Strait of Hormuz permanently without tolls. Then, when all of those have been verified, we could talk about opening up the economy. That's what a good deal would look like for the United States. What would a bad deal, meaning a good deal for Iran, look like? First, continuation of nuclear development, even if it's pushed off, even if it's slower. Maintenance of nuclear facilities, capacity to keep nuclear material in the country. Second, ballistic missile development revitalized. No sanctions on ballistic missile development and money flowing into the country that could be used for additional ballistic missile development, which would create that umbrella of defense and offense that would prevent action to get rid of their nukes. Third, continued funding of terrorism abroad, the rebuilding of the terror apparatus that Iran had prior to October 7th. Hamas in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and terrorist groups in Iraq. If they got more money coming in and they could continue to fund terrorism, that would be a win for them. Fourth, continued Iranian control over the Strait of Hormuz. Basically, being told by Iran or given the tacit threat that anytime things went wrong, Iran could shut down the world economy again and again. Fifth, the biggest one, much more funding is going into Iran. Remember, before this war, Iran was basically on its last economic legs. The Iranian rial had spiked from 42,000 per American dollar to 1 million per American dollar. That was before the war. Their economy was falling apart. That's why you had these gigantic riots in the streets, which ended with the Iranians shooting some 42,000 people in a weekend. So if more money goes into Iran, that's a win for Iran. That's the long-term standard. I'm setting the standards up front so we know what we're talking about. That's because one of the things that I don't like when we talk about good deal, bad deal, is being vague about what we are saying. To reiterate the 5 conditions for a good deal for the United States: no nukes, no ballistic missile development, no funding of terrorism abroad, opening the strait permanently without tolling, and then, theoretically, opening up the economy. What would the best deal for the Iranians look like? First, continued nuclear development, even covert nuclear development, which would mean maintaining their nuclear facilities in country, with all supposed watering down of nuclear materials to be done in Iran, then continuing to cheat and hide. Second, ballistic missile development. Third, funding of terrorism abroad. Fourth, continued control over the Strait. Fifth, more funding going into Iran. What we have here, according to the Trump administration and Iran, is a memorandum of understanding, a temporary agreement. What would a good temporary agreement look like for the United States? There are three options: good, mediocre, and bad. A good temporary agreement would look like anything that facilitated a good permanent agreement, whatever got us towards the goal of no nukes, no ballistics, no funding of terrorism, and opening the Strait permanently. A mediocre temporary deal would ensure that Iran doesn't get any of the things it wants long term, but it wouldn't achieve all the good stuff. So it wouldn't disarm them of nuclear weapons or ballistic missiles, but it would not release a bunch of money to them and might temporarily open up the Strait a little bit. It might release a small amount of money to them, and then we would go home. But we would leave the sanctions in place, which is the most important thing. Not opening the Iranian economy, not allowing them to tie their activity to terrorist groups in the region, and not allowing them to rebuild their ballistic missile facilities with our money. A mediocre deal would basically be us packing up our stuff and going home. Why would that be mediocre and not great? Because we've done an enormous amount of damage to Iran's facilities. We've already set them back tremendously. If we go home right now, then Iran will maintain some vestigial control over the Strait, will not permanently get rid of the Iranian nuclear program, and will not eliminate their ballistic missile capacity. It won't prevent their funding of terrorism. What would a bad temporary agreement look like? It would not only leave their nuclear development intact, but also incentivize it. It would allow them to allocate more money to ballistic missiles. It would allow them to extend their terrorist reach, and it would allow full-scale, continued Iranian control over the Strait. Which is it? We don't know. We literally do not know, because the administration has not and will not release the text right now, which they should. I'm happy to analyze a deal once I know what's in it. I cannot analyze a deal for or against until I know what the hell is in the deal. My hunch is that the temporary agreement does not do much at all. The text was eventually released, and it's a bad deal. Not even a mediocre one, a bad deal. It floods Iran with funding, which they will use to fund terrorism, because that's what they did before, and that's what they've done every time that they've gotten money. They're very consistent about that. I, too, am a very consistent person. My principles, the ones that I actually believe in, apply to both sides of politics equally. When Biden released a bunch of money to Iran, and they used it to fund October 7th and a bunch of other terrorist shit, I condemned that stupid move that cost people their lives, including Americans who lost their lives. Lots of them, actually. So when Trump does the same thing and releases a bunch of money to Iran that they will use to fund terrorism, and we all know that, I condemn that move for the same reason. That kind of equal integrity is how you know that you actually believe in a principle and not just your team. Trump himself has rightly condemned Obama's bad deal with Iran, a devastating deal which set all of this in motion by giving them a 10-year path to the bomb. The most religiously extremist, cult, crusading, bloodthirsty terrorists on the face of this earth with a nuclear bomb and a stated, oft-repeated intention of imposing a caliphate on the entire globe. Like Trump, I condemned Obama's stupid deal for those reasons. Trump's deal is the same thing. So I condemn it too. I don't play teams. I play principles because it's not a game. I actually believe in what I say I believe, and I believe that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons or a path to them. With that in mind, J.D. Vance, our vice president, came out this week and publicly said that anyone who does not throw principles out the door and fully support their team, anyone who even so much as asks perfectly reasonable questions about how this is any different than the very thing that we have all condemned from the other side, clearly just wants all Iranians to die in bombings. Now you listen here, Mr. Vice President, and you better listen good. And yes, I do, as an American, have the right to speak to you in this way because you are my Vice President and you work for me, bucko. You answer to me. I do not answer to you, sir. So let's get that straight right off the bat, Mr. Vice President. I do not appreciate having a supposed right-wing vice president who goes completely left-wing on me in his behavior. When I ask you a legitimate question that I have every right to demand answers to, and you respond not by answering the question, but by throwing out groundless and purely hyperbolic accusations, you are doing the exact same thing as the left does when they call people racist just to make them shut up because their point is legitimate. Stop playing woke games with me, JD. Answer the damned question. You work for me. That's what it means to serve in my government. And if you want to keep your job there come 2028, and especially if you want a freaking promotion to the most powerful office in this country, you better realize that you do answer to us, sir. And you better knock all of this the hell off. Do you hear me? I'm not playing with you, boyo. So, since you will not be honest and direct, I'll be honest enough for two. As a person, one who would maybe live down the street from me, I like you just fine. As a politician whose decisions will affect my life, I do not trust you as far as I could throw you. And as a 110-pound, 5'3" woman, that ain't very far. Tucker Carlson has openly claimed that you are one of his woke right cult disciples. You have not denied it. That may be because it's true. If so, that is a deal breaker for me. So let me be very clear so that you know the terms. I will vote for the left again before I will vote for you if that is the truth. And I do have the right to hear the truth from you, sir. I have a right to know what I am voting for. You do owe me answers on that. Honest answers. You do not have a right as an American who claims to believe in democracy, otherwise known as the will of the people, or as a professing Christian who claims to believe in and to serve the God who called himself the truth, you do not have any right as someone in office to hide the truth about who you are, what you believe, or what you will do with power if I vote to give it to you. And you do not have a right to lie to me about any of that. You have a right to believe differently than I do, but I have a right to know what you believe and to know what I am voting for so that I can vote in accordance with my beliefs, not because you deceived me. Now, you could also be refusing to answer the question about being a Tuckian instead of a Christian because you don't want to alienate Tucker's voters. But I'm going to be real honest with you, JD. That's a very dumb strategy that will lead to the very defeat that you are trying to avoid, because you are alienating everyone else to keep those voters, like the left alienated everyone else to keep their fringe voters. How did it work out for them? Based on the polling on the right, when it comes to Iran, Tucker's voters account for approximately 20% of this party, 1 out of 5. And you are going to lose the other 80%, that would be 4 out of 5, if you don't clarify who the hell you are really damn fast. I didn't go to an Ivy League school, but I can do math, sir. And if you want to keep up the leftist attack tactics, then I don't even care who you are, because we're already done. So stop throwing hyperbolic accusations out there to distract from the legitimate question, and instead answer the damned question. How is us releasing money to Iran, who will use it for terror, any different than Biden releasing the money to Iran and having them use it for mass terror, including the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust itself? How is us allowing Iran to continue down the path to a nuclear bomb, knowing we'll have to address it with blood and lies again in the future, any different than Obama allowing them to continue down the path to a nuclear bomb, which we're paying for right now? Answer the damned question, sir, or you can find yourself a new base of voters come 2028. Do not play with me, sir. You may be a Marine, which I profoundly respect, but I'm a pretty riled up Southern woman. And you do not want to push me any further because you grew up around women like me and you know better. I hope I have made myself clear, sir. You owe us a sincere apology for your behavior this week. And you still owe us some honest explanations. The only question is, do you have the balls and the integrity to do it, to meet those obligations that you do have, or not? And the answer to that question is going to tell me everything that I need to know about you. But on the bright side, at least global oil prices fell to their lowest levels since March, with Brent crude dropping over 5% to around $83 per barrel after last Sunday's announcement of the then still undisclosed Iranian deal. WTI crude oil, the U.S. benchmark, also fell by about 6% to below $80 per barrel. And what about at the pumps? Before the strike started, the national average was hovering just below $3 per gallon as of Monday morning, right after the announcement, Average gas prices in the United States were sitting at $4.07 per gallon, which is down nearly 50 cents from 1 month ago, according to AAA. If energy prices continue to decline, a very big if, but if they do, like dominoes, other wallet herders driven primarily by the high energy costs, like inflation, might come down too, with May reporting the hottest inflation in 3 years at 4.2%, only exceeded by Biden's 40-year high right before that. Meanwhile, the stock market also seemed to like the news, despite not having any of the details. Futures tied to the Dow Jones Industrial Average jumped nearly 1% after the deal was announced. S&P 500 futures also went up by 1.2%, and the NASDAQ 100 added 2.1%. Other markets around the world also reacted positively to the news of an unknown deal between the United States and Iran, with South Korea's Kospi jumping 5%, Japan's Nikkei 225 gaining 5%, and Australia's S&P ASX 200 climbing 1.25%. Iran was the big news of the week, but it was not the only big news. On Tuesday, the director of the FBI, Kash Patel, revealed that the FBI had thwarted a major plot that involved snipers and drones carrying explosives that were all part of a plan to target the UFC Freedom 250 event that was held at the White House last Sunday night, which was attended by over 4,000 people who could have become victims. Director Patel said that the FBI first became aware of the plot on June 10th, ultimately arresting 5 suspects before the UFC event safely took place. Officials told Fox News that the plot was to use explosive-laden drones to target the buildings in an attempt to herd panicked people into the path of a group of snipers who would take them out. A second wave would have then been launched targeting the White House itself. Those apparently responsible for the planned bloodshed have been arrested, including, according to Fox News reports, 19-year-old Tyson Proper, Brian Omar Roa, and Michael Allen Thomas. Proper was arrested in Ohio, while Roa and Thomas were both arrested in California and charged with conspiracy to commit murder. According to the complaint, as reported on by the Daily Wire, Proper was hit with 4 criminal charges, including conspiracy to commit an offense against the United States of America, attempted murder of officers or employees of the United States, possession of a firearm in furtherance of a crime of violence, and receipt or transfer of a firearm used to commit a felony. According to the complaint, in March of this year, Proper joined a TikTok, China, just spreading the mental health. It only took them a few months to just completely F him up. A TikTok group called Vanguard of the Old, where the members openly discussed how they believed that the United States needed to be destroyed and rebuilt from the ground up as they saw fit. Proper allegedly told the FBI that he believed that many of the group members had prior military experience. The complaint against them stated that the members of that group stated that they wanted to protect the United States, which they believed was heading in the wrong direction. Members of that group believed that the United States needed to be torn down so that it could be rebuilt. Some expressed a desire that people who were involved with Jeffrey Epstein should not govern the country. So they were conspiracy theorists. The FBI's complaint also explained that local law enforcement had shown up at a home in Knox County, Ohio, after Proper's own mother called them on the evening of June 10th because she was deeply concerned about her son's behavior, his recent gun purchases, and his disturbing communication with people online. Proper's parents told law enforcement that their son had recently quit his job and started communicating online with unknown individuals about missions and recons. Losers! Yet another internet mind virus that escaped into the real world. Proper also used $3,000 of his graduation money to buy several boxes of ammunition, estimated by law enforcement to be in the thousands of rounds, plus 2 plate carriers with AR-style magazines, an AR-style rifle, and a built-up rifle painted with an American flag. That is all according to the criminal complaint against him. That equipment was turned over to law enforcement. Meanwhile, Proper was then admitted to a local hospital based on his homicidal ideations, and local law enforcement contacted the FBI, who had other ideas for him. Proper's mother told the FBI that he had joined a group that expressed ultra-religious and anti-government sentiments. Okay, so these were crusading anarchists, specifically citing grievances about the government corruption, the handling of the Epstein files, data centers taking up all of the water in communities, and other government actions. So this young person, sadly, became yet another walking mind virus, which means that his youth will now be spent in prison, when he might have been perfectly normal without politics and mentally ill internet groups and Chinese interference. Hey, those are the facts. If they bother you, take it up with someone else. I didn't create them. I'm just pointing at them. On June 11th, a search warrant was executed for Proper's phone, and that was when they found signal chats that laid out detailed plans to conduct an attack in Washington, D.C., along with detailed imagery of the National Capital Region and maps of the area. And that is all according to the complaint, which also noted that the maps specifically highlighted sniper locations, potential drone launch locations, and other detailed tactical planning. That same day, according to the criminal complaint, the FBI interviewed Proper, who admitted that he and others had been planning a coordinated attack together against the United States government during the UFC event on the White House lawn. According to the complaint, he stated that the plan was for members of his group to act as snipers and additional shooters, preferably with long guns, staged at or near the southern evacuation point to conduct shootings of members of the crowd and high-value targets as they fled from the explosive devices which had just been detonated. The high-value targets included both wealthy people, like Elon Musk and others, and politicians. According to Proper, this attack was designed to jumpstart a revolution in the United States. According to the text messages that were included in the criminal complaint by the FBI task force officer Christopher Betts, one of the potential targets was Senator Marsha Blackburn, based on the reason they wanted to kill her because, according to the messages that were plotting this attack, in which Proper had written, "I got a possible target. Marsha Blackburn is senator for Tennessee because she's taken money from the pro-Israel lobby and supports them." Correction, dimwit. The American pro-Israel lobby. AIPAC is American, not Israeli. See the difference? For example, you are an American who opposes them, as is your right. I, on the other hand, am an American who supports them, as is my right. See how that works? That doesn't mean that anything nefarious is going on just because the people that are brainwashed like you are outnumbered by the people who are not. Here's a fun fact for you. The American Association of Realtors lobbies our government with far more money than AIPAC does. So does China and several other foreign governments. Go look at the list. Because those are all facts, sweetie. Go look at the financial records, you moron. Are American realtors trying to control things in a nefarious way too? Because that is what lobbying money proves, right? Everyone lobbies. If you were against it for everyone, that would at least be consistent. Or if you were against it for everyone, that would at least be consistent. But being okay with it for almost everyone and only being against it when it has something to do with Israel or Jews is singling them out for different treatment, which by definition is bigotry. But you might understand this if you listen to people who are more intelligent than devil-worshipping Candace Owens and conman Tucker Carlson or Looney Tune pathetic living in his basement Nick Fuentes. Probably doing his cat right now, which is more than you're going to have available to you in jail. Meanwhile, Officer Betts said that a review of the chat planning this attack had revealed other targets, apparently including Senator Jim Justice, Senator Shelley Moore Capito, Representative Carol Miller, and Representative Riley Moore, all of whom hail from West Virginia. Their images, it should be noted, were apparently taken from the radical website trackapac.com, according to the complaint. Yeah, they think this freaking lobbying group is Darth Vader. Here he comes. Cue the scuba breaths. One suspect allegedly told officials that he wanted to target capitalist elites, billionaires, and politicians who received donations from the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. He was apparently fine with donations from anyone else, because those are the only ones that could ever be nefarious. Director Patel had this to say. On June 10th, FBI and our law enforcement partners became aware of a potential threat to the UFC America 250 event in Washington, D.C., involving individuals outside of the National Capital Region. And thanks to the rapid action of this FBI, our partners, and the Department of Justice in a multi-state operation, multiple individuals are now in custody, and allegedly planned attacks were stopped cold. Fox News reported that a total of 23 individuals were reportedly investigated over their suspected ties to this plot. One suspect was arrested in Cincinnati, Ohio, and others planned to travel to Fredericksburg, Virginia prior to the UFC event, where the group was set to rendezvous for the bloodbath. As Director Patel said, while the result represents the best of investigative work, it was also nothing out of the ordinary for this law enforcement team. We are built to detect, respond to, and bring to justice those who threaten the lives of American citizens, particularly during large gatherings like the historic UFC 250 fight. That's exactly what we did here. I want to thank our great agents and partners, This work remains ongoing, and we will continue to update the public as permitted. This attack was just the latest example in a recent surge of left-wing violence from the assassination of Charlie Kirk, 3 attempted presidential assassinations, the gunning down of 2 young staffers at the Israeli embassy, the assassination of the United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, the violence directed at Tesla dealerships via fire bombings and shooting sprees, the attack on Sam Altman's home, the attack on Josh Shapiro's governor's mansion, the almost daily violence against ICE, etc., etc., etc. But remember, the official narrative is that the violence is coming from the right. You just can't name it. Even the man that currently stands accused of starting the Lockman and Palisades fires, in which many people died, was reportedly inspired by Luigi Mangione. And likewise, the suspects who stand accused of plotting this attack on the UFC Freedom 250 event at the White House hoped that their radical political violence would jumpstart a revolution, carnage, which they wanted all because they were upset about things like the Epstein files. Tyson Proper faced a detention hearing on June 17th. And he faces a preliminary hearing on June 29th, both in the Southern District of Ohio. However, I want to note that compassion was being shown to his mother, a cosmetologist there in Ohio, after she broke her silence on Wednesday, posting a Bible verse to her Facebook page that read, "Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." One user commented back, "I can't begin to imagine how difficult your choice, the right one, was. But you undoubtedly saved untold numbers of lives, including Tyson's. You know we're praying. We love you guys." Another person wrote, "You have done the hardest thing, but the Lord will hold you tightly in his tender care because of it." To which I would like to say, don't believe the news and don't let the internet change and dehumanize you, because most people out here, whatever they think about the political issues, are decent people. And they will show you that if you give them a chance and if you are willing to see it. But it seemed like the nation's government was busy on all fronts this week. Federal immigration agents captured the leader of 2 foreign terrorist organizations, who also now stands accused of holding his own wife hostage after leading our authorities on a chaotic and dangerous car chase through our streets. Well, terrorists do love their human shields. On Monday, the Department of Homeland Security reported that Felipe Linares de Oliveira del Aquila, who goes by the moniker Don, I applaud you for editing, apparently led Homeland Security investigation agents on a chase through Mooresville, North Carolina on June 5th, before he crashed into stopped traffic full of innocent people. And then he took off on foot. Still, the agents did eventually catch up to Aquila, who was swiftly arrested. Aquila is in the United States illegally, as he is actually Brazil's problem to deal with, not ours. But you see, he is wanted in his own home country for criminal association and on extortion charges. And we just decided that's who we want here. They will make this a much better place. According to DHS, Aquila also previously served as the commander of 2 U.S.-designated foreign terrorist organizations, that would be the PCC and the CV, whom the State Department classifies as being 2 of the most violent criminal organizations in Brazil, saying that these 2 groups have orchestrated brutal attacks against Brazilian police officers, public officials and civilians. And that's what we want to import here. This is just beyond moronic at this point. As noted, law enforcement intelligence indicated that Aquila was holding his own wife hostage as he prepared to flee to Mexico, before he would have no doubt broken back in. During an interview with those authorities, Aquila's wife confirmed that she had been held by him against her will. Agents found numerous cell phones, laptops, money, and a 9mm handgun while searching Aquila's car, which, again, he is not legally allowed to own as an illegal, but what can I say? People who break laws. You know, it's not complicated. In a statement, Mark Zito, the special agent in charge of HSI in North and South Carolina, said, "This arrest demonstrates the unwavering commitment of HSI to protect our communities from dangerous international criminals by removing a known leader of violent foreign terrorist organizations wanted for serious crimes, including criminal association and extortion. We have prevented further harm to innocent people here and abroad. Our agents, working alongside dedicated state and local law enforcement partners, acted swiftly and decisively to ensure this individual will no longer threaten the safety of our neighborhoods. HSI will continue to pursue those who endanger our communities and bring them to justice." This illegal now faces state felony charges of fleeing in order to elude arrest. Meanwhile, federal authorities are also hoping to hit him with federal charges of being an alien that was illegally in possession of a firearm and with kidnapping charges. ICE has lodged a detainer with the county jail that is currently holding Aquila, asking them to eventually hand him over for deportation proceedings when they're done with him. You know, and this is not just happening here. Even other places are getting tired of pretending like we are somehow obligated to make our own societies into worse and more dangerous places by having no consequences for individual people who come into the country and make it worse through violence and or other crimes. Why we're just obligated to commit suicide on a national level, or more accurately, to commit murder-suicide because you're insisting on taking everyone else with you, is moronic. There's absolutely no reason why we should make our societies even a little bit worse. It took us a long time to build them. Our ancestors put their lives into building it. You cannot give me one reason why we're obligated to tear it down and make it worse. On Monday, the Swedish parliament passed a law that allows them to rescind an immigrant's residency permits based on their behavior while they're in the country. Crazy, I know. That country's parliamentarians passed the good behavior law, which covers both pending and current Swedish residents, by targeting any immigrants who are affiliated with extremist groups, have unpaid debts in the country, or are doing undeclared work under the table. Johan Forsell, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, that looks right to me, but, you know, things are pronounced different from country to country, who is Sweden's Minister for Migration, said back when he proposed the Good Behavior Bill in March that anyone who doesn't make the effort to do the right thing shouldn't be able to count on staying. Radical, I know. And Sweden's parliament agreed with that entirely reasonable immigration policy. This law has been passed ahead of the fast-approaching parliamentary election in September as part of the right-wing government's crackdown on crime and high levels of immigration, the very issues that won the right-wing party the election in 2022. Human rights advocacy groups criticize this entirely reasonable law, calling it arbitrary because residency permits can be revoked for non-criminal behavior. But I would point out, if you are making society worse, whether it's through crimes or through promotion of radical fanaticism or through hurting the economy by taking on a bunch of debt that you never intend to pay back, if you are making society worse, tell me why that society should feel obligated to become worse in order to allow you to stay. The world does not revolve around you. Guess what? Everyone counts. Why are you the only person with rights? Why does the society that you claim that you want to come into have no say over what they want and no rights? Answer me that. That's not equality. That is oppression. A Stockholm group called the Civil Rights Defenders. You know, they always have such nice sounding names to promote such destructive ideas. They claimed the good behavior law leaves people in uncertainty about what actions or expressions can be used against them. Yes, vague accusations. Fun, fun, fun. Till Daddy takes the she-bird away. It's as simple as this. Behave yourself and contribute positively, and you have nothing to be uncertain about. Is that so hard? Because it's not for me. That's only a problem or confusing for a very specific type of person. Regardless, the reality is that under the new law, the residency permits are reviewed by the migration agency and their decisions can be appealed by the migration court. The good behavior law was passed alongside Sweden's new so-called snitch law. The so-called snitch law requires that workers at certain government agencies are actually obligated to report any illegal foreigners that they encounter to the police. Yes, I know this is hard to grasp, but try to follow me. Government is there to actively guard against violations of the law. That is their whole reason for existing. So, requiring government employees to do that, their job, should be a given. If you, as an individual, do not want to participate in protecting the integrity of the laws, that's not what you want your life to be about, that's fine. Get a different job. Don't go into the government. Because government is about preserving the integrity of the laws. It means it's not for you. Why do we pretend that this stuff is complicated? It's not. No one forces you to work at the government. If you work at the government, you have to do the job. This is not hard. In recent years, after lots of violent attacks, etc., Sweden has greatly tightened down on its immigration policy, shifting from being a country that was very welcoming of foreigners, including Afghans and Syrians, to now only accepting high-skilled workers that make their society better. Shocking, I know. People actually have some self-interest that factors into life every once in a while. In 2016, an all-time high of over 160,000 immigrants entered Sweden in 1 year. And that yearly number was projected to stay at 100,000 immigrants entering that country every year after that. As a result, as of this spring, Sweden's population consists of around 10.7 million people. And the number of foreign-born inhabitants there right now accounts for 1 out of every 5 people throughout the entire population. Sweden's common sense crackdown on radical mass immigration stands in stark contrast to most of their European neighbors, who have continued to open their borders to millions of refugees and asylum seekers in recent years. Thus, the immigration debate has reached a boiling point in Britain and in Ireland after years of extreme crimes being perpetrated against the population by migrants, all of which gained worldwide attention. So they not only are crime victims, they're being humiliated. and after decades of the mass rape of their women, including children, which they were told to shut up for the sake of diversity. That's a quote. Sweden is also facing a massive increase in violent crime, according to the Swedish National Council for Crime Prevention. There were reportedly 769 rapes in 1975 and 10,167 rapes in 2024, which is an increase of 1,222% in just 50 years. Again, we are not obligated to make our societies worse to prove some bizarre point that no one has clarified as of yet. There have also been rising numbers for shootings, bombings, and gang violence in Sweden's suburbs, all of which have negatively affected that country's once peaceful reputation worldwide. Back over here, we have our own problems, and yet some people are not content with that, and so they manufacture non-existent ones just to top the whole thing off. A 21-year-old leftist college student was taken into police custody after they admitted to burning a cross in Grant Park in Chicago, supposedly to protest against the Trump administration, because, burning crosses, you immediately think of protesting the Trump administration. And so, as protest of the Trump administration, he apparently created a race hoax, one that sparked outrage from Democrats who called the hate crime, quote, seeds of racism and fascism. That was before they found out that it had been perpetrated by their side. So, no doubt a new twist on the meaning behind these events to redefine the act in a way that is now justified, maybe even noble, is in the works. But in the meantime, let's recap. This incident literally caught fire on June 9th, when a disturbing video showed a wooden cross burning in Grant Park. Chicago's firefighters extinguished the flames, and police released photos of a person of interest who had been seen fleeing the scene, as reported by ABC 7. With no suspects in custody yet, and I'll give you the benefit of the doubt of presumably no idea that it was one of their own, although the record for these things being total hoaxes does speak for itself. Illinois' Democrat governor, J.D. Pritzker, rushed at the chance to weigh in, saying, "The fact that it even occurred at all speaks to what happens when the seeds of racism and fascism grow unchecked in our country. The threats are real." At least we agree on that. And in times like these, it's easy to fall prey to despair, to think that the fight for justice is just too costly to engage in, that the mountain is too high to climb, and the path is too narrow to navigate. Well, you would know all about that last one at least. But I have to give him credit. He didn't burst into song. And then there was the twist. On Monday, NBC Chicago identified a senior at the University of Illinois Chicago, Merlin Liu, as being the perpetrator, who is suspected of carrying out this cross-burning arson. And they identified him as such because he admitted to constructing and burning the cross and placing a red hat, which was supposed to symbolize MAGA hats, on top of his race hoax as a protest, remember, against the Trump White House. At least that's the official story. If you're not an American, for some context, you should know that for decades, the Ku Klux Klan, the Looney Toonies and White Hoods, a notorious white supremacist group, used cross burnings to intimidate black communities here in the United States. But the SPLC funds most cross burnings these days. The reporter, Chuck Goody, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, asked the perpetrator, "How did you land on a burning cross?" And he responded, "Just, it came up to my head one day. I wanted to find something that I could do by myself, like no organization, no friends. Loner, I did know about this historical relevance beforehand, but I didn't know the severity, how racially motivated it may seem from what I did." Bullshit! In reference to the fact that last week Lou had sent a scripted video to the local NBC affiliate, moron, claiming responsibility for the cross burning, saying, "I don't want to wait till his term ends. I don't want to wait until he may or may not get impeached. I want him gone right now. Undemocratic. Veruca Schultz." Goody asked, "On that video, are you threatening him?" And Lou replied, "No." Bullshit! I'm sorry. My allergy to lies that a child could outdo is getting worse these days. Goody seemed to agree, firing back, "You say that you think he should be brought to an end." Then the full-fledged lies came in. "But what do you expect from someone perpetrating a race hoax?" As he tried to dodge with, I said he deserves to stand trial to the American people. Did not." And Goody pointed out, "You use the word end." Having been caught in his own pitiful, pathetic baby lies, and with that tactic having failed him completely, Lou switched to another lib fave, gaslighting sight games, saying, "That's what I mean. By end, I don't mean like a civil war, if that's the imagery that you're trying to imagine. Protection! No one mentioned civil war. Where'd you get that? You get the picture. The little coward did it. He knew full well what he was doing. It was meant to be a race hoax. He also meant exactly what he said in his video outing himself. But he's just too cowardly of a little shit to just say that now that it's getting real." The college senior said he was trying to send a message to Trump, and what he labeled as his, quote, MAGA Christian nationalist supporters, like the good little parrot that he is, saying he's just scamming people. And I think that's a great reflection of how this country works right now, where money controls everything. Money has power over healthcare. Money has power over transportation. No, dude. Voters control everything. And your side got fewer votes because their policies were insane, their candidate was a sick joke, and their attempt at convincing people to think like they do was to yell at them to shut up. I hope that clarifies things for you. But having any integrity on the issues is dead for most people. Your position is determined by the footing of your team, not based on the principles that remain solid no matter what your team does. Even with Lou in custody and his motives now being publicly known, Mayor Brandon Johnson, who is as unprincipled political as they get, still said that this faked incident is, quote, a painful reminder of how hatred towards Black Americans still permeates in our society. Even though it's not, because it had nothing to do with hatred. It was a hoax perpetrated by your side. And that fact is part of the record at this point, my dude. You know, is gaslighting really all that you people have? because that is so 2020. Meanwhile, the FBI is investigating to determine whether the arson still amounts to a hate crime, and either way, it should be prosecuted as an arson, which is definitely illegal whether or not hate was involved. He lit something on fire in a public place. That is arson. Put his little college butt in jail. And that example will go a long way towards stopping this extremist, performative nonsense, especially among young people. Their parents didn't spank them, but that doesn't mean we can't. But don't let the headlines or the internet fool you with their manufactured reality. Out here, most people are still basically sane and decent, even the ones who see things differently than you do when it comes to the political issues. For example, Tuesday night, one person was killed and 5 others were injured as a private jet crash-landed on a highway in Texas, sending a fireball into the dark night sky near our southern border, where ordinary citizens sprung into action to save the victims before emergency crews could even arrive. Here's what happened. This NetJet's Cessna Citation Latitude went down on Loop 20 in Laredo, Texas, shortly after 10 that evening, striking a moving car in the process before skidding across multiple lanes and ending up upside down and completely engulfed in flames. 6 people were on board. The video that has been circulating online captured this stunning scene of a jet tipped onto its side, being consumed by flames, and bystanders refusing to stand by and watch the strangers aboard die. One man used a sledgehammer while another used a shovel to try and shatter the glass in the cockpit and open the aircraft door in a desperate attempt to pull survivors from the burning wreckage. Their actions were caught on camera, despite not being the kind of story of American grit that makes it into many headlines, although it should, because this story is far more real and representative than many of the other stories in the news. As the Europeans that are here for the World Cup have noted, quote, "If you want to hate America, watch the news. If you want to love America, drive across it." This country is good, and its people are good. As evidence, 5 survivors were saved and transported to a local hospital in stable condition. The 6th person did not make it, sadly. None of them were publicly identified at the time because their next of kin still needed to be notified first. Some of the first responders also suffered smoke inhalation during their rescue, the one that heroically saved the lives of complete strangers at risk to themselves. According to the flight tracking data from Flight Radar 24, the downed aircraft was traveling from San Jose del Cabo, Mexico, to Austin, Texas. Less than 4 hours later, it diverted toward Laredo after the airport tower reported a mechanical issue and lost contact with the plane. Minutes later, the plane was down. NetJets, the private aviation company that is owned by Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway, confirmed that it is cooperating with authorities as the crash is being investigated by several federal agencies, including the FBI and the National Transportation Safety Board. Laredo's mayor, Dr. Victor Trevino, urged residents to be patient with the road closure and to avoid speculation while the investigators do their work, saying, "As mayor, I understand the importance of allowing investigators to complete a thorough and objective review before drawing any conclusions. Aviation investigations take time." Let's switch gears to world news next. On Wednesday, the United States ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, offered an obvious, entirely pragmatic, and blunt solution to one of the most intractable problems in the Middle East. Deport every single member of Hezbollah and Hamas to Iran. I like it. Ambassador Huckabee posted, Iran demands Israel cease defense of border against Hezbollah. Gaza peace plan depends on Hamas disarming. Idea. Every member of Hezbollah and Hamas deport to mothership in Iran. Result. Lebanon and Israel free from Iran terror proxies. Give peace a chance. Well, sadly, that might actually work, as opposed to the strategy that's been tried for over 80 years and beyond. And we can't have that. I mean, if problems were solved for good, what issues would ignorant sheep on Western campuses protest against? Where would they possibly find meaning for their pathetic, empty lives? What would leftist politicians virtue signal about if problems were actually allowed to be solved and the world was actually allowed to move on from them instead of circling the drain forever and ever and ever? This characteristically direct proposal cuts straight to the heart of the problem that has destabilized the entire region for decades. The fact that both Hamas and Hezbollah are, in the most meaningful sense, Iranian agents. The Congressional Research Service has documented that Iran's support for destabilizing armed violent groups in the region has been, quote, a pillar of the Iranian government's foreign policy since the 1979 founding of the Islamic Republic. Support for these terrorist killers and pillagers has been coordinated through the Quds Force of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The State Department estimates that Iran provides up to $100 million every single year to Palestinian terrorist groups, in addition to the millions of dollars in aid that they steal from the world to finance their death-causing terror. Iran's $100 million a year goes to Palestinian terror groups, including Hamas, while Iran's most powerful proxy, Hezbollah, receives the bulk of its funding, training, weapons, and explosives directly from Tehran. Ambassador Huckabee's truth bomb landed amid the potential for some progress on the diplomatic front. Reports of the possible resumption of friendly Israeli-Lebanese relations have surfaced in recent weeks, raising cautious hope that Lebanon might finally escape the orbit of Iranian unwelcome pull. But skepticism is the lesson of history here. Lebanon's sovereignty has been hollowed out twice. First, by the terrorists in the PLO after the 1969 Cairo Accord, which turned southern Lebanon into a terrorist launchpad for attacks on Israeli civilians. And then those Palestinian terrorists ignited the catastrophic civil war that killed roughly 150,000 Lebanese people. And then Lebanon was again invaded and gutted by Hezbollah, which rushed in to fill the vacuum that had been left after Israel's 1982 war forced the PLO terrorist Yasser Arafat into exile in Tunisia. By 2023, Hezbollah's arsenal had grown to over 150,000 rockets, which dwarfed the official Lebanese army. Hezbollah's financial corruption metastasized throughout Lebanon's banking sector, directly leading to what the World Bank describes as one of the most severe economic depressions on the entire globe since the mid-1800s. The Lebanese pound, which was steady for 2 decades, has lost over 98% of its value as a result of these Iranian-funded Palestinian terrorists inflicting themselves on everyone else in the region, not just the Jews. Then there is the human cost of Iran's proxies unleashing blood in other countries, which was underscored when 92 retired U.S. generals and admirals published an open letter on the first anniversary of the October 7th massacre of over 1,200 Israelis by Hamas, warning that, quote, Iran's reign of terror transcends boundaries. October 7th is not an isolated incident, but one front in a much larger global civilizational struggle, end quote. No doubt, Ambassador Huckabee's mothership deportation proposal will not appear in any formal framework for peace, even though it should, because no one actually wants peace, or they would do whatever was necessary to get it, and they never have, which tells you they don't actually want it. But his logic that sustainable peace in Lebanon and Gaza requires severing, not managing, Iran's grip on the region via its terror, bloody proxies. That reflects the growing consensus among U.S. and Israeli strategists that half measures have done nothing but consistently fail and perpetuate the loss of life. On the other side of the world, in the local news, a 15-year-old girl in Oklahoma is in intensive care after downing Benadryl as part of a viral TikTok challenge, a dangerous, predatory trend from the Chinese app that is re-emerging. Leah Presson participated in TikTok's Benadryl challenge, which encourages teenagers to film themselves downing toxic amounts of the over-the-counter allergy medication. The goal is to induce hallucinations and delirium that would also be filmed for so-called entertainment. But after drinking the liquid Benadryl, Leah experienced seizures, and then she went into cardiac arrest. And now, after multiple tests at the hospital, she was found to have no brain activity. She remains in the intensive care unit at Integris Health Baptist Medical Center in Oklahoma City. Leah's father, Richard Presson, initially believed that his daughter's seizures were from her history of asthma, but he admitted that she had participated in the dangerous trend of TikTok challenges before. He told KFOR, I don't even want to think about a funeral because I feel like there's still hope and everybody's like giving up too soon. I believe in miracles, that she's definitely a miracle baby. For the record, even though it is available over the counter, an overdose of Benadryl can be fatal or cause severe side effects. You should know that Leah is not the first kid from Oklahoma to end this challenge with a devastating consequence. Earlier this year, 11-year-old Molly Miller died from an overdose that was linked to the Benadryl challenge on TikTok. 3 Connecticut children also died from Benadryl overdoses just in the past few months, all of which was reported by the Daily Wire at the time. After the deaths of the 3 children in Connecticut, the Connecticut Office of the Child Advocate officially warned parents that this medicine is potentially dangerous to children of all ages, saying we strongly encourage parents to store all medications safely to ensure they are not easily accessible to children. We also want parents to know that resources are available if their children are experiencing mental health needs, meaning if TikTok has made them mentally ill in ways that they would never have come up with on their own. Hey, I'm sorry, the truth hurts. You want TikTok for yourself, even though it's not healthy for you either, to be blunt about it. And you also apparently don't want to keep the kids off of it, even though it's a propaganda machine for a lot of harmful things. Kids are dying or having their lives irrevocably harmed, and you are willing to accept that. That's the honest reality here. You can stand by that and say, there's always casualties in everything. Okay. But I'm not going to sugarcoat the reality. That is the reality. Meanwhile, the FDA also issued a statement back during the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic when this challenge first emerged, as kids began living completely online with mentally ill influences, warning the public about the dangers of overdosing on Benadryl and informing parents and healthcare professionals, saying, "We are aware of news reports of teenagers ending up in emergency rooms or dying after participating in the Benadryl challenge, encouraged in videos posted on the social media application TikTok." Just for reference, this trend has gotten to be so bad that now any searches for the Benadryl challenge, or just for Benadryl on TikTok, lead straight to a drug and alcohol warning. Meanwhile, Leah's poor father said, as he sits with his brain-dead adolescent, that I just want everybody to be aware of where they can educate their kids. But these challenges are just silly, and they need to be educated so it doesn't happen again. I'm sorry, sir. I feel sympathy for you. But education is not going to fix this. These challenges are not silly. They are a result of a mentally ill internet culture, one that children are especially susceptible to. You cannot educate someone out of mental illness, especially when all of the people around them are engaging in it. Either society decides to stop glorifying mental illness, and therefore incentivizing it, or individual parents decide to at least shield their kids from it. But education is not going to fix this. It's just not. It's important to be honest about what will help and what won't. Kids' brains are not fully developed until 25 or 26 years old. You can tell them the consequences of something, but the part of their brain that can factor those consequences in to the appropriate degree that they merit is just not developed yet. That is the hard science here. But that was obviously not the only disturbing trend on social media. A new one is all about the young people publicly celebrating the violent murder of 17-year-old Austin Metcalf. As we speak, young people are busy dancing with knives in stabbing gestures to a song that they've dubbed the Austin Bop. As we and everyone else by this point has covered, Austin Metcalf was fatally stabbed by Carmelo Anthony at a track meet in 2045 for no better reason than because he was repeatedly asked to leave the opposing team's tent. The video and the 911 calls are available to be seen at this point. This latest mentally ill trend, unsurprisingly, appears to be racially driven, with some young black people mocking Austin after his killer was rightly convicted for taking his life. And they're encouraging other people to be as mentally ill as them. Disgusting new TikTok trend called the Austin Bop has exploded among young black Carmelo Anthony supporters, the ex-user I'm Mean Zero posted online, captioning a video of this trend. They gleefully dance with and without knives while making repeated thrusting and stabbing motions towards the chest in a brazen mockery of a teenage boy's brutal murder in their videos. This isn't edgy content. This is straight up demonic celebration of violence. Thug culture remains one of the most toxic, self-destructive forces rotting the black community from within. It glorifies murder, mocks victims, and turns human tragedy into dance challenges. Despite the race-baiting narrative that has been shamelessly peddled by the Anthony family, the teenage witnesses to the stabbing, a large portion of whom were black, said that Carmelo Anthony was the one in the wrong, instigating the entire thing down to the lethal stabbing, while these same black boys described Austin as a leader and a brother, not a racist. Even a defense witness said that this was all Anthony. But support for the convicted murderer is not isolated to online teenagers with underdeveloped brains. Last week, the official representative of people with underdeveloped brains, that would be the Democrat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett of Texas, downplayed the violent murder of Austin on the basis that the 5-inch blade that was used to kill him was a small object, in her arbitrary opinion. And because it was small, that meant that it did not qualify as a deadly weapon, despite the fact that it was a weapon that not only could cause death, it literally did, making it definitionally a deadly weapon, sweetheart. But this is the level of stupidity that she regularly, proudly exhibits for the country, as though it is genius. She also publicly claimed that the Metcalf family, whose baby is in a coffin as we speak, doesn't understand the fear and agony of black women like her, who sit in Congress and have never buried a child, declaring, "We're going to have just some real conversations about race in this country." Yes, we are, but not in the way you mean. We've been having that conversation for the last decade and a half, as race relations have plummeted from both 70% of black people and 70% of white people rating race relations as good or very good, to now 70% in both groups rating them as bad, thanks to people like you. Facts don't care about your feelings, Jasmine. And the facts are that your race-based approach to society is making everything measurably worse, to such a degree that it is not even up for debate anymore. But unfortunately, she was not alone in setting the bad example of ignorance is entertainment for the kids. Several other Democrats deemed the trial to be unfair, although they couldn't say how, apart from the fact that a black boy was held responsible for his actions as though his skin pigment had nothing to do with it at all. One of these destructive examples included Crockett's fellow Texas representative, Christian Menifee, who said that situation was a travesty and complained that the minorities that were on the jury were not black, even though they were people of color and made up a quarter of the actual jury that convicted him and a third of the jury pool. And even though he isn't intelligent enough to realize that he just insinuated that black people, had they been on the jury, would have ignored the evidence and behaved differently than all of the other jurors representing multiple races, directly implying that black people are somehow uniquely immoral and uniquely unjust in a way that other races aren't. Nice message, oh inclusive one. And speaking of inconvenient realities, on Thursday, it came out that the man who currently stands accused of being the ringleader of the group that thoroughly planned to attack the UFC Freedom 250 event at the White House last weekend is an illegal from Mexico. The Justice Department said that Abraham Alvarez was responsible for planning, organizing, and directing the planned attack, and it turns out that he had overstayed his visa after being brought into our country as a child. Here's what happened. According to the Department of Homeland Security, Alvarez came here on a B-2 visa which is typically given for tourism or for medical reasons. The one that was issued to Alvarez expired a quarter of a century ago, back in 2001, and he would have been deported. But he was granted deportation relief in 2014 under Barack Obama. And then he thanked us for that by leading a group of terrorists who wanted to tear the country that took him in, despite his crimes against it, to the ground so that they could rebuild our country in their own image, regardless of the will of the people that it belongs to. And they intended to do this through bloodshed involving both explosives and snipers at the White House, slaying masses in the delusional hope that this carnage would spark a bloody revolution that would be unleashed on all innocent people across this country. Well done, Obama. As the Assistant Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security, Lauren Biss, told Fox News, this illegal alien from Mexico should never have been allowed in our country. He was the ringleader of a failed terror attack targeting UFC Freedom 250 at the White House. He will face justice and swiftly be removed from our country. According to the criminal complaint against him, Alvarez specifically wanted to target the president that was duly elected by the actual people of this country, Donald Trump, but, screw the actual Americans. He's here, he's taking over. He also wanted to kill their elected vice president, J.D. Vance, the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, who he thought would be there for some delusional reason, and Elon Musk. Of course, neither Elon Musk nor Benjamin Netanyahu were at this event. As for the details, Alvarez went by the moniker Shepherd in his terrorist group chat, where the attack was planned. Under this name, on June 10th, he posted maps of the D.C. area along with this statement. This is the best action I see. Position your teams in the purple dots, counter sniper and drones, long range circled area, great shot. Easy out into the river. Tyson Proper, the 19-year-old co-conspirator that we already covered, was the one who apparently identified Shepherd as being the primary individual involved with planning. And according to the FBI, he directly stated that Shepherd was the leader of the group and described him as aggressive in tactical planning. The FBI's special agent, Eugene Noel, stated, from his home here in Nebraska, Alvarez allegedly directed and recruited others across the country to conduct a horrific attack against government officials in a mass casualty event. Our team worked around the clock to locate and apprehend Alvarez, take him into custody, and collect crucial evidence. Alvarez has now been charged with conspiracy to murder and conspiracy to commit an offense against the United States of America. That is not how you say thank you, which is all that we should have ever been hearing from you. And before you say, well, that's not fair, if I was starving on the streets and I broke into your home, and instead of kicking me out, as you would have every right to do, you invited me to stay because you felt sorry for me in my terrible situation, and you offered to share with me the meal that you had made, the only acceptable response from me is for me to say thank you to you. No other response is even acceptable. It doesn't matter if the meal that you fixed happens to be the food that I hate most on planet Earth. The only appropriate response is thank you. If I said anything else to you besides expressing my gratitude for the generosity that you did not owe me, you should tell me to get out of your house. This guy can get the hell out of my country because it is my country, not his. And he is about to find that out. And speaking of indefensible left-wing causes, on Thursday, a human rights group reported that a young Iranian woman who sang without a hijab at a desert concert where there was no live audience to see her has just been sentenced to 74 lashes for it. You proud of supporting this? This brutal but far from uncharacteristic punishment was reported on one day after Tehran signed a temporary deal with Washington. The poor woman that is about to be flogged for not wearing the compulsory hijab that Western liberal women love to cosplay in is Parastu Ahmadi, a 28-year-old singer and film school graduate. She was sentenced by a calm court to this flogging plus a 2-year travel ban and a 2-year ban on her performing as a singer. Her crime was this: live streaming a concert on YouTube in December 2024, performing to no audience locally, just a camera and her voice, but streaming it online to an entirely voluntary audience of viewers, meaning you free people, and doing so without wearing her apartheid hijab. 8 musicians and crew members that were involved were sentenced alongside her, all convicted of the crime of offending public decency. But Miss Ahmadi is no stranger to defiance. During Iran's 2022 uprising, she rose to prominence with her stirring rendition of From the Blood of the Youth of the Homeland, which was how she became a symbol of the resistance. Now, she will face the lash of a man's whip for singing folk songs in a way that he did not give her permission to. Your team, feminists. Earlier this week, Iran also executed Javad Zamani and Abolfazl Saidi, 2 men that were convicted of the crime of, quote, waging war against God, meaning they were hanged for their roles in the anti-government protests earlier this year. Their hangings were only a small part of Iran's staggering killing spree, in which at least 22 political prisoners have been executed just in 1 month. Between the end of March and the end of April alone, roughly 1 hanging every other day, many of them following trials that included torture and forced confessions. 3 teenagers, 2 of them only being 17 years old, have reportedly had their death sentences upheld by Iran's Supreme Court in violation of international law, which I don't believe in, but you lefties say that you do. So now what? You got to choose between the 2 principles you claim to believe in. Against the death penalty, in favor of international law, but you love your hijabs and the oppressive men who force them on women. So now what? While you sort that out, the researcher Esfandiar Aban at the Center for Human Rights in Iran noted that the use of the death penalty as a political tool on this scale has not been seen since the 1980s. Meanwhile, BS propaganda to prop up and justify a very bad deal with these same people continued to flow from the current administration. I told you I'm not a team player. Don't expect me to be one. When you do something good, I'll praise it as good. When you do something bad, I'm going to call it out as bad. That's the deal. You don't have to like it, but that's going to remain the deal. At the G7 this week, shortly after agreeing to the Memorandum of Understanding with Iran, President Trump tried to con everyone about his Iranian counterparts, suddenly saying they're not radicalized and they're, looking to help their country. They were nice to deal with. They were strong people, smart people. The prominent dissident, Messiah Linejad, disagreed with Trump's self-serving assessment, writing, "One day after the U.S. signed a deal with the Islamic Republic, the regime handed Parastu Ahmadi 74 lashes for singing on YouTube. A woman's voice scared them more than any superpower ever could. This is not a normal government. This is apartheid against women." How refreshing is the truth after political bullshit? So to be clear, the men who are flogging women with a whip for not wearing the compulsory hijab that they imposed on them are the good guys, the oppressed, and ICE agents are the Nazis. Do I have that right? You're going to have to tell me you're the people that are obsessed with the fictional Handmaid's Tale and think that you're the one living through it. Look Iranian women in the face and say that. And as far as ICE agents being Nazis, that's funny, because in Florida, a Tampa ICE officer saved a 6-year-old child from drowning by jumping into a pool and performing emergency CPR on that unconscious child. The Department of Homeland Security discussed how just last month, on May 16th, Gregory Simmons had saved a child who he found floating unconscious in a pool in Pasco County, Florida. After pulling the child out of the water, Officer Simmons gave the child CPR until he regained consciousness. The Assistant Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security, Lauren Biss, stated, "This officer swiftly sprung into action and delivered life-saving medical care to this 6-year-old who drowned. Our agents truly are the best of the best. They put their lives on the line to arrest the worst of the worst. Instead of demonizing ICE law enforcement, sanctuary politicians should be thanking them for removing criminals from their communities." In Florida, the local authorities also praised Simmons for saving this small child's life. Corporal Leathers of the Pasco County Sheriff's Office said, "Due to his quick thinking, decisive actions, and willingness to place himself into action during a critical incident, the child survived and is expected to make a full recovery. His actions directly contributed to saving the life of the child and reflect exceptional courage and selflessness." In a press release highlighting Officer Simmons, the Department of Homeland Security also noted other examples of ICE officers taking heroic actions. As we covered at the time, in March, an ICE officer performed a Heimlich maneuver on a 1-year-old who stopped breathing while he was at JFK International Airport. That child started breathing again after the actions of this ICE officer. At the time, we also covered another incident in February when 2 off-duty ICE officers performed CPR on a 4-year-old child who was found unconscious in a pool in Minnesota, saving that child, who eventually regained consciousness. Despite this, ICE has faced hostile and violent public protests across the country from leftist activists that are attempting to disrupt the lawful crackdown on illegal immigration. Anti-ICE riots have even broken out in California, Minnesota, and New York over the lawful detention of illegal foreign criminals. Boy, do you all know how to pick your causes. I don't know that I've ever seen a more passionate group of people, more lost on where to direct that passion. Meanwhile, federal authorities arrested 11 illegal foreigners in Massachusetts that they revealed are tied to a massive taxpayer-funded benefit scam that stole more than $1 million from us. During a press conference in Boston on Thursday, the Justice Department announced official charges against a total of 15 fraudsters, 11 of which are illegal foreigners. On top of that, several of the accused fraudsters are John Does. meaning that they used stolen identities and their names remain completely unknown. Real safe. Colin McDonald, the Assistant Attorney General for the Justice Department's Fraud Division, said that federal investigators are still working to determine these fraudsters' true identities, saying, "We don't know who they are fully, but we do know who they are not. They are not the American citizens they pretend to be, and from that initial lie, the charges today allege that they gained access to the buffet of benefits generously given by the American taxpayer for needy Americans. In some cases, the victims of these crimes, the rightful beneficiaries of these funds, could not access benefits they needed. And why? That was because their identities had been stolen and their names had been already used in the programs to steal benefits. In other words, American citizens were boxed out of these programs because illegal aliens took their names to then take their money, or more accurately, your money, the American taxpayers' money. Illegal immigration carries real and substantial costs to American taxpayers and places enormous strain on our public benefits system. And the further we look, the more fraud we find. Among those charged with this was the 56-year-old Dominican national Santo Escalatico Coelho, who allegedly committed aggravated identity theft and made false statements to a healthcare program which allowed him to commit $162,180 in mass health fraud. One of the other accused illegal John Does is charged with false representation of a Social Security number, aggravated identity theft, and making false statements to a healthcare program which allowed him to commit mass health fraud that totaled $75,000, thanks to his aggravated identity theft of a real beneficiary. Another John Doe is charged with illegal theft of SNAP benefits, plus theft of government funds and aggravated identity theft in connection with his SNAP benefit fraud that totaled $11,000 out of your pocket. Federal authorities also charged a 45-year-old Dominican national who was living in Somerville, Massachusetts. Mario Baez Romero was charged with aggravated identity theft and passport fraud in connection with his $26,942 in SNAP theft, plus his $48,785 in mass health fraud. He was found by federal authorities living it up on a recreational boat near Key Biscayne in Miami, Florida, back in May. Another one of these suspects is the 40-year-old illegal from India, Mithul Patel. He allegedly staged at least 6 pretend armed robberies of a convenience store in order to allow the alleged victims, including himself, to apply for U visas, which are only supposed to be for the victims of violent crimes. So he orchestrated violent crimes. According to officials, another accused fraudster had already been convicted in Massachusetts on federal drug charges. According to U.S. Attorney Leah Foley, authorities are still working to identify the John Does, and they have asked the government of the Dominican Republic for assistance with this. While Colin McDonald, the Assistant Attorney General for the Justice Department's Fraud Division, told the Daily Wire's Casey Acaba during an interview that followed this week's press conference that illegal foreigners have flocked to Massachusetts because of that state's generous public benefits system, including state healthcare programs that they have been illegally stealing from. The Democrat governor of Massachusetts has squared off against the current administration over its demands for her state to hand over their data on SNAP applicants and recipients, which she doesn't want to do because she doesn't believe in answering to the people. As A.G. McDonald said when calling her out for this, Things like being transparent for the records that the state maintains because the state is responsible. Not only do they receive the money from the federal government, we give them the money, they are then responsible for the verification checks, the eligibility checks. We are asking, and we have been asking for them to give us those records so that we can see and we can pressure test, just make sure that fraud's not happening, but they refuse to give us those records. It begs the question of, what are you trying to hide? Yes, it does. But then again, we already know the answer, don't we? But there was even more serious news on the illegal foreigners front. On Thursday, the Daily Wire reported that an illegal immigrant that the federal government was supposed to deport nearly 3 decades ago just allegedly raped a 16-year-old girl in New York as she was walking home. At the time, Long Island's News 12 reported that Aureliano Antonio Melendez Reyes, who looks exactly like Dr. Evil off of Austin Powers if you added about 150 pounds onto him. I'm serious. Go look at the mugshot. A person who is actually El Salvador's problem, not ours, allegedly approached this poor teenage girl in Huntington, New York on June 6th and asked her for her phone number, which she refused to give him. Then this nearly 60-year-old illegal perv allegedly forced her into an alley where he raped her. The teenage girl was able to break free and even managed to scale a tall fence, only partially clothed. Then she called 911 for help as she ran. But this accused rapist continued to pursue this poor girl while she was on the phone with the authorities. Police finally arrived at the scene, where they arrested this foreign predator who snuck across our border at an unknown time without being detected, according to the information that the Department of Homeland Security gave to the Daily Wire. He was discovered after doing this and did receive a deportation order all the way back in 1998. And yet here he was, raping kids. I do not know how you can even come anywhere close to justifying this sort of stuff. I really do not. And then look in the mirror and tell yourselves what a good person you are. In a statement, the Assistant Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security, Lauren Biss, said, "This monster is charged with rape, sexual abuse, and endangering the welfare of a child after he raped a 16-year-old girl who was walking home. This sexual predator never should have been in our country and able to prey on this innocent girl." According to News 12, Reyes is facing up to 25 years behind bars if convicted on the rape charges against him. Meanwhile, DHS said that Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, has lodged a detainer against Reyes, asking the local authorities to hand over this disgusting suspect after his prosecution. But it is unlikely that the local authorities will honor ICE's detainer due to their sanctuary laws. New York's Democrat Governor Kathy Hochul believes in protecting other countries' rapists as they prey on our innocent children, which is why she recently signed new anti-ICE legislation to prevent any local law enforcement agencies from being allowed to enter into agreements that they want to make with federal immigration authorities and turn over these kinds of criminals that are sitting in their jails. Because that's all that these agreements do. The ones that she just banned. They keep cops from turning over illegal criminals after they have been arrested out in the community for victimizing innocent people. The ones in the jails for crimes. Her legislation only protects the people in the jails, the people who have committed crimes. Because her legislation cannot stop ICE from going out into the streets. Just to be clear about exactly who she is and is not protecting. She is not protecting illegals on the streets that are doing nothing wrong. She is only protecting the ones that are raping 16-year-old little girls. Her legislation also tries to ban ICE agents from wearing masks and from entering churches, schools, and other sensitive locations. But that is not going to hold up in court in the long run, as we have seen elsewhere and know. So, for the record, between January 20th of 2025 and December 1st of 2025, local authorities in New York released 6,947 criminal foreigners who were here illegally back onto the streets after they had committed crimes, according to DHS. 7,000 illegals who had been arrested for crimes and were re-released in 10 months and 11 days in New York. That's on Kathy Hochul. Their crimes include 29 homicides, people who would still be alive if not for politicians protecting their foreign killers instead of them. 2,509 assaults that would not have happened, 199 burglaries that would not have happened, 305 robberies that would not have happened, 392 dangerous drug offenses that would not have been going on our streets, 300 weapons offenses that would not have gone down on our streets, and 207 predatory sexual offenses that would not have happened to innocent victims. So for those of you keeping score at home, if not for sanctuary politicians, and if each crime had only one victim, which is not the case for many, many of them, but with only one victim per crime, that is 3,941 victims that did not have to be victims in just 10 months, thanks to Kathy Hochul. Plus all of the other victims that were never linked to these criminals. Because statistically, we know that for every crime that you are linked to, you have committed several more that you will never be linked to. So, what are we actually talking about? 4,000 actual victims, at a minimum, if there's only one victim per crime, which there's not. So in reality, you combine that with the unknown victims, like at least 10 or 12,000 people whose lives Kathy Hochul has made worse in just 10 months. 12,000 victims between the known victims, the unknown victims, and the multiple victims of the same crime. 12,000 people in 10 months. You do the math if you keep voting for this. Which is why BIS called out Hochul and her fellow sanctuary politicians in New York, asking them to honor ISIS detainer this time, at least against Reyes, by committing to not releasing this criminal illegal alien from jail and to turn him over to ICE. New York sanctuary politicians must not release criminals from jail into New York communities. But they don't care about New York communities. Their actions make that clear, and actions speak louder than words. So I suggest all people start listening to the right thing. When you are willing to protect a rapist who violates a child for the sake of your ideology, then your ideology is downright evil. But that's not true of everyone. It is true of most politicians. And it is true of many of the influencers out there. But it is not true of most normies. Take the Tartan Army, the residents of Scotland who are here for the World Cup and who have decided to give back to their host city by donating to Boston charities after drinking their pubs dry in good old Scottish fashion, drastically increasing revenue for local businesses. Fans of Scotland's national team, known affectionately as the Tartan Army, have taken over New England for their team's first two matches in the 2026 World Cup. As a result, local bars have reported doing triple the number of their usual sales since the arrival of our Scottish friends, and for me, family. I'm primarily Sicilian, but the second biggest branch of my family tree is Scottish, followed by a wee bit of the Irish. Now get this, and think about if we were to apply these standards to our basic expectations of foreigners, period. First, these Scottish fans expressed their gratitude to their hosts by picking up after themselves instead of leaving a mess for someone else to clean up. Then they followed that up with generous donations in the tens of thousands of dollars to local organizations. In an interview with Peter Smith at ITV News, one member of the Tartan Army said, "If we can help ease the pain, it'll make their life a little bit better. Why shouldn't we help out in some way? I hope that message spreads as well. It's that simple." We don't need politicians to fix things for us, people. We actually do a way better job of it ourselves. We need politicians and politics to get out of our way, and we each need to do the right thing by each other. That's the truth. That's how you fix things. For the Tartan Army, this tradition of donating to the communities that host their sports events spans 2 decades, during which the Army has followed Scotland's team all over the world. While they were among us, the Tartan Army visited Hasbro Children's Hospital in Providence, Rhode Island, where they donated $10,000 towards cancer research for the kids. Sarah Frost, the hospital's president, even met up with the fans to personally thank them for their 5-figure donation, saying, "The energy, the excitement, the love, the passion that you all bring, Providence is a smaller community, but you have won the hearts and minds of everyone here." The fan that she was speaking to replied, "Job done," beaming a bright smile at her. But they weren't done. The Tartan fans made their next stop at Horizons for Homeless Children in Boston's Roxbury neighborhood. Members of the Army toured that center, playing bagpipes for the children, and then capped it all off with a $1,200 contribution. One Tartan Army soldier told NBC 10 Boston that all we were seeking to do was to come with the Tartan Army, spread a little peace, hope, and goodwill, and make a difference to the American people. Scotland's last match in Boston took place on Friday the 18th against Morocco, and unfortunately they lost that one. The Tartan Army then followed their team to Miami for their final group stage match, where they will no doubt continue their tradition of donations and drinking the bars dry, although you may have to settle for rum in Miami. And speaking of both good people and bad, it's time to ask yourself if you're part of the problem or part of the solution. Are you, the person that you're responsible for, the only person that you're responsible for, making the world better for yourself and for others? Or are you making the world worse for yourself and for others? It's time to try and recognize the truth staring back in the mirror. A local taxi driver in New York City expressed his gratitude to the Moroccan rapper French Montana for raising money for him after a violent mob destroyed his livelihood. You see, after the Knicks' victory at Madison Square Garden on June 11th, street violence left this poor cab driver, Noureddin Batat, if I'm mispronouncing your name, I apologize, injured and shook up. Here's what happened. A mob jumped on top of his taxi and dragged him out of it, and then they completely destroyed the vehicle that was his living as their way of celebrating their team's victory by victimizing random people that they came across. In fact, the mob was so far gone to violence that Mr. Batat said later that he was lucky to be alive. This cabbie was born in Algeria, so a translator relayed his story, saying, "The crowd came and they attacked him. They grabbed him out of the cab. They grabbed him by the neck. Someone punched him in the head. They shattered the windshield. They opened the front doors and even the trunks. They were yelling, 'Nixon 5! Nixon 5!' The video of their assault went viral, showing these selfish and animalistic brutes jumping on top of the cab and smashing in the windshield before trying to flip it over and set it on fire. At least one person was reportedly arrested in connection with this unprovoked attack on Mr. Batat. But why wasn't everyone? As for the cab driver, he suffered a back injury and scratches from their attack, and now he says he's afraid to return to work. Still, according to the New York Post, the National Taxi Workers Alliance started a GoFundMe for Mr. Batat, and that fundraiser quickly gained momentum after it was openly promoted by French Montana. That rapper continued to stay involved, even presenting the cabbie with his check when the fundraiser was complete, telling the world everybody got together, and they raised up to $75,000. These are the people that make the world go around. They don't bother nobody. They out there working, minding their business. Likewise, Mr. Batat said that he is grateful for every single stranger who came to his aid, saying through his translator that it made him feel like he has another family here, even though his own family is not. Be a decent person, not a self-centered victimizer with nothing to be proud of except for the second-hand accomplishment of somebody else, an athlete that you don't even know and have to live vicariously through because there is nothing admirable about who you are. Quite the opposite. You don't have to be that kind of person. So don't. Be better. That was not the only head-shakingly sad story that got wrapped up this week. The final report on the catastrophic implosion of OceanGate's Titan submersible that notoriously killed all 5 of the people that were on board during a voyage to the wreckage of the Titanic in 2023 was released. But first, to briefly recap, the Titan imploded on June 18, 2023 during its 88th dive. After a loud bang was heard, contact with that vessel was lost, roughly 2 hours after it began descending towards the wreck site of Titanic, which is approximately 435 miles south of Newfoundland. After an international search effort failed to locate the vanished vessel, debris that was recovered from the ocean floor confirmed that there had been a catastrophic implosion. All 5 of the people on board were, of course, killed, including OceanGate's co-founder and CEO, Stockton Rush, the Titanic expert, Paul Henry Nargillet, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that name, the British businessman Hamish Harding, the Pakistani businessman Shahzada Dawood, and Mr. Dawood's 19-year-old son, Suleiman. According to the final investigative report that was released on Wednesday by the Transportation Safety Board of Canada, the notoriously tragic implosion was caused by fundamental design flaws, a defective carbon fiber hull, and a lack of regulatory oversight. Their 136-page report was damning in its assessment of OceanGate, the irresponsible company that was behind this doomed expedition. The investigation into their submersible concluded that the vessel's construction and testing did not follow the accepted engineering standards, writing that the investigation determined that the as-built properties of the Titan's carbon fiber cylinder were never validated to ensure they met the theoretical values used in the design process, and that the construction and testing of the Titan did not follow standard engineering practices, meaning that OceanGate never verified whether the vessel's carbon fiber pressure hull could actually withstand repeated dives to depths of approximately 12,500 feet, which is the depth at which the wreck of the Titanic now rests. Investigators found that while the company did test the vessel at extreme depths, it failed to assess how repeated exposure to the immense pressure of water way down there would affect their design for the hull over time. The report stated, as a result, OceanGate did not know for how long the Titan's pressure hull would remain structurally intact when used repeatedly for dives to the depth of the Titanic. Investigators also examined unused sections of the same material that had been used to construct the Titan, and they discovered structural defects in the material itself, which compromised the integrity of the whole vessel. In addition to their negligent engineering failures, Canadian investigators said that broader regulatory shortcomings allowed the submersible to continue operating despite there being significant safety concerns. The chair of the Transportation Safety Board, Joanne Merrier, stated that when it came to the Titan, critical information existed across multiple federal government organizations, but no one was responsible for connecting the dots. Without a complete picture of the operation, the Titan continued to operate in Canada without regulatory oversight. Now that the investigation is complete and the report is out, Canada's Transportation Agency has issued 6 recommendations that are aimed at strengthening oversight of any submersible operations and at addressing the safety management failures that were identified during this investigation. These findings largely mirror the conclusions that were reached by the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board last year, which determined that Titan's carbon fiber pressure vessel contained multiple structural anomalies and failed to meet the necessary durability requirements for a sub that was being used this way at these depths. Canada's report comes just months after the U.S. Coast Guard's Marine Board of Investigation also concluded that had OceanGate's co-founder and CEO, Stockton Rush, not been killed aboard, investigators would have recommended criminal manslaughter charges be considered against him by the Department of Justice. Even without that move being possible, OceanGate stopped operating shortly after their disaster. In a statement following this report's release, one company's spokesperson pointed out that OceanGate had fully cooperated with investigators and again offered their condolences to the families of the people that they had killed, adding, "We appreciate the professionalism shown by the TSB and the thoroughness of its investigation and final report." It is so bizarre that you get pats on the back for doing the bare minimum, for cooperating after you've killed people, as opposed to actively getting in the way of investigators? And people honestly expect a pat on the head and a good boy just for not being actively harmful? That bar's a little too low. Speaking of which, on Friday, after the peace deal had been signed, Iran's henchmen in Hezbollah struck an Israeli tank in southern Lebanon, killing 4 soldiers, including a battalion commander, while openly proving that the Iranian-funded terrorists have no intention of honoring any terms that Iran performatively agreed to earlier this week in the Memorandum of Understanding with the United States. The latest attack, perpetrated by Hezbollah, hit just outside of the Lebanese village of Tibnet in the middle of the night, as an IDF official told the Washington Post. Israel responded by striking multiple sites of known Hezbollah infrastructure across southern and eastern Lebanon. FAFO. I'm over it. So if you can handle the truth, please tune in. If you can't, I'm probably not the podcast for you. The ensuing fallout was swift. Vice President J.D. Vance scrapped a trip to Switzerland, where he was supposed to have led the American side of negotiations, and both Washington and Tehran announced that they were postponing any talks about peace with each other. But here is the foundational fact of this situation. The memorandum of understanding that was signed on Wednesday by President Donald Trump and Iran's President Mossad Pezeshkian explicitly declares, quote, the immediate and permanent termination of military operations on all fronts, including in Lebanon, end quote, with both parties pledging to refrain from the threat or use of force against each other during the 60 days that the deal was good for. Iran's funded proxy Hezbollah, who fought alongside Iranian forces in the current hostilities, just broke that deal, rendering it null and void if we choose to do what we should. Trump had just posted, we expect a complete ceasefire on all fronts, including Lebanon, Hezbollah, and Israel. Within hours, 4 Israeli soldiers were dead in a Hezbollah attack. Now what, O salesman? Israel understands the reality here. Ministers in Netanyahu's government called for intensifying their strikes against Hezbollah after the deaths on Friday. And Friday's strike did not come out of nowhere. It is only the latest bloodshed in a consistent campaign of violence that Hezbollah has sustained during multiple ceasefire agreements. Bomb them. You think I'm joking? Tell the Lebanese that they have 24 hours to get out of there, and then carpet bomb everyone who does it until every member of Hezbollah is dead. That is how you end a reign of terror by sand barbarians. Hezbollah initiated its current massacre against Israeli civilians on October 8th, 2023, one day after Hamas's massacre of thousands and before any response by Israel had happened. They started firing a hailstorm of rockets and guided missiles into communities of civilians in Israel's border villages. In what these crusading religious radicals in Hezbollah called solidarity with the crusading religious radicals in Gaza. And they only escalated the violence from there, perpetrating one of the most sustained bombardments in the entire history of Israel's fight to defend their people from slaughter at the hands of Hezbollah. By the time a ceasefire halted the major fighting on November 27, 2024, Hezbollah had carried out 5,185 documented attack waves against innocent people in Israel, firing over 10,000 rockets, plus deploying anti-tank missiles and suicide drones. The deadliest single strike of that phase of their attempted genocide killed 12 Arab children who were playing on a soccer field in the Druze village of Majdal, I'm probably mispronouncing that, sorry, Shams, on July 27, 2024. In 1 month alone, October of 2024, a full year after October 7th, we saw 1,158 attacks by Hezbollah, the most intense single month of the conflict so far. But these religious nuts are fully incapable of honoring any deal, and they always have been. There are records to prove that. Since a new ceasefire took effect on April 17th, Hezbollah has carried out 975 documented attack waves, 745 of them targeting IDF forces operating inside Lebanon, which was allowed by the ceasefire, and 230 attacks that were directed at people inside of Israel itself. According to the Alma Research and Education Center, which tracks attacks on Israel's northern front, 17 IDF soldiers and 1 Israeli civilian were killed during that ceasefire period alone, thanks to Hezbollah's violations. Neither the April ceasefire nor a subsequent statement of principles that was issued on June 3rd so much as slowed down the pace of Hezbollah's attacks. In the first 7 days of June alone, Hezbollah launched 198 attack waves, including 93 rocket and missile barrages against IDF forces and 30 strikes on Israelis in their own country. Friday's killing of 4 more soldiers, which again came within 48 hours of the new U.S.-Iran peace agreement, committing both sides and their allies to permanent cessation of hostilities, makes it clear that whatever Tehran performatively agreed to in Versailles, they intend to allow their proxy Hezbollah, as always, to violate every word of it at the same speed as if the deal did not exist at all. Make no mistake, this deal binds only one side because only one side has the honor to live by it, and I don't play by those kind of rules. The question is, why are you willing to? And speaking of botched politics, new information came out on Anthony Fauci this week. According to dozens of new documents that were declassified by the outgoing Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, it was officially proven that Fauci had pushed American intelligence officials to control questions about the origins of COVID and conduct a biased inquiry instead of a free one. On her last day in office, Ms. Gabbard published 67 new documents and emails. They provided documented proof of Fauci's inappropriate involvement with the intelligence community's probe into the origins of the COVID pandemic. Ms. Gabbard also said that she found proof of retaliations being perpetrated against any intelligence officials who advocated for the now widely acknowledged lab leak hypothesis of COVID instead of the now debunked natural origin narrative that was pushed so hard by Fauci in order to cover his own illegal tracks at the Wuhan lab. In a video that was posted on Thursday night, Ms. Gabbard stated, "I'm releasing never-before-seen communications and documents that expose exactly how Fauci worked with politicized career leadership in the intelligence community to suppress the truth about his actions, the virus's lab leak origins, and his role in directing U.S. funding for this dangerous research that caused immeasurable harm and countless lost lives." She added that the intelligence community almost always incorporated Fauci's recommendations. As for what was in the documents, among other things, one email from July 13th, 2021 showed investigators within the intelligence community discussing how Dr. Fauci recommended that the IC reach out to the below individuals, referring to the authors of a paper that was heavily pushing the claim that COVID had occurred naturally. In reply from an unidentified intelligence official on July 14th, 2021, that intelligence officer stated that, in this particular case, given Dr. Fauci's background, we absolutely would like to follow up on his outreach suggestions. In this case, he's not a policymaker. He's an expert with a wealth of knowledge about current and historical research who probably knows better than most who the real coronavirus experts are. The newest unclassified documents also reveal that Fauci met with the CIA's Weapons and Counter-Proliferation Mission Center on June 4, 2021, where they discussed the origins of COVID, and Fauci pushed them to continue accepting the natural origin narrative and encouraged them to contact others who thought that the virus had a natural origin. Now, we all know by now that Fauci was a sick quack who did nothing but lie from the AIDS epidemic on. So why does this matter? Because in 2024, Fauci was very vague with congressional lawmakers when he testified about his interactions with the intelligence community. When asked if he had spoken to any U.S. intelligence agency about viral research before, during, or after the COVID-19 pandemic, he said, "I can't give you the specifics of it." And then he quickly pivoted to discussing anthrax instead. As Ms. Gabbard pointed out, politicized, self-serving leaders like Dr. Fauci covered up their own wrongdoing and abuses of power, manipulated intelligence, lied to Congress, and undermined a duly elected president by restricting his access to the vital facts he needed to keep the country safe. It's time you know the truth. Senator Rand Paul chimed in with empty virtue signaling, posting, "This release includes additional documents revealing the truth about the lab leak origins and Fauci's lies to Congress under oath. I've referred Fauci to the DOJ multiple times for criminal prosecution over his web of lies. Thank you, Director Gabbard. More to come." But now he is lying to the American people, because as you know, during his final days in office, President Joe Biden issued blanket pardons to virtually everyone that he had ever met, including Fauci, to preempt any criminal consequences for the immoral and criminal things that he did. So history will be his only punishment, where his name will live in infamy beside people like Judas and Benedict Arnold. And speaking of the effects of putting harmful people into positions of power, last December, a Jewish child was choked and strangled with a noose by a classmate during an anti-Semitic attack at a middle school in Boulder, Colorado. And now a federal civil rights complaint has just been filed, alleging in the documents that were submitted to the Office for Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Education that this troubled school district utterly failed to protect this Jewish boy despite multiple prior situations that they were aware of. The official complaint was finally filed last week by the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, on behalf of a middle school student and his family. It alleges that Boulder Valley School District failed in its legal obligations as defined under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, which prohibits any discrimination based on national origin, including anti-Semitic harassment, in any schools that receive federal tax dollar funding, which they do. According to the filing, this minor, identified only as Student A to protect his safety and his privacy given that he is still a child, was physically assaulted at Southern Hills Middle School by a peer who specifically targeted him because he is a Jew. I hope your parents are proud of the aggressive little bigot that they raised, but they're probably just like you. The complaint reads, quote, "The harassment began with anti-Semitic remarks directed at Student A on the soccer field by classmates, plural. As described further below, it escalated rapidly to include verbal slurs, including repeated use of the word kike directed at Student A, threats, including of gun violence, and Nazi salutes in 2024, and progressed to repeated physical assaults, including strangulation, anti-Semitic taunting in the lunch lines, after school, and in class, including organization of a game called Jew Touch Tag in PE, in which Jews are chased. And where was the gym teacher? And Holocaust-related mockery, including a student telling student A in math class, "At least my grandma didn't spend 8 years in hiding." Yeah, she didn't have to, you little shit. And asking student A, "Do you get scared when someone raises their hand? And do you get scared when someone counts to 9? The most violent incident occurred on December 15th, 2025, when a classmate fashioned a Chromebook charging cord into a lasso, threw it around student A's neck without warning or provocation, and dragged student A backward from a chair while calling student A stupid kike. Conduct so severe, it resulted in a police report. That incident was followed by a February 26th, 2026 incident in which a former friend of student A threatened to bring his father's gun to school to shoot people, and then stated in student A's Spanish class that Hitler should have killed all the Jews when he had the chance. And what did the Spanish teacher do? A March 2026 assault in which a fellow student punched and kicked student A multiple times, and an April 2026 incident in which a fellow student approached student A while student A was playing basketball alone at recess and spat in student A's face. This is what Colorado, land of the tolerant libs, allows to go on and on for months in their elementary schools, which you pay for with federal tax dollars. The ADL made it clear that this child's family notified school officials and district administrators of what they already knew each time that they learned about a new race-based incident involving student A, many of which occurred in class, as we just covered, where there were presumably teachers. And the family is prepared to provide the email records to prove how many times they addressed the ongoing race-based violence with their child's school and got nowhere. As I said, the school knew what was going on because, as the complaint alleges, one teacher who was present during the strangulation assault told a detective with the Boulder Police Department that she did not bother to report that attack to school administrators. And that admission is contained in an actual police report that was attached to the federal filing of this civil rights case. The school district did conduct a bullying investigation with a report that is dated December 15th, 2025, and one student received the minor punishment of what was described as being a 1-week-long suspension, although it is unclear whether that student actually served even the full amount of that week consequence. And what about all of the assaults after that? A second police report on a separate incident has also been requested by the complainants, but they are waiting to receive a copy of that report from the Boulder Police Department so that they can attach it to this filing. Meanwhile, the complaint cites the district's own policies, including Boulder Valley School District's policy on the rules of student conduct. The victims argue that the school's response fell way short of even its own stated standards, let alone coming anywhere close to meeting the requirements of federal civil rights law. This stuff is not optional. You will abide by it. the shameful case in which this awful behavior has permeated to children, primarily due to the sickness online, a lot of which is promoted by politicians, merely represents the nationwide surge in anti-Semitic attacks in this country, many of which have taken place in K through 12 schools. And that surge is well documented, despite the fact that civil rights advocates say that physical assaults targeting Jewish students remain underreported and underdisciplined when they are reported, pointing out that this is not an option. Schools have a binding legal obligation to respond meaningfully when racial harassment rises to the level of this kind of hostile environment for students. But the very same teachers who preach about the racism of the past and pat themselves on the back in the delusional belief that had they been there, they would have been on the side of angels, do nothing in the face of the present racism, which proves them delusionally wrong. Keep lying to yourselves. But at least some problems are being addressed. A sting operation took down a ring of illegal pedophiles this month. When these 5 illegal foreigners arrived at a hotel in Homestead, Florida on June 9th, they thought that they were about to be greeted by young underage girls that they would be allowed to sexually abuse and violate. Instead, they were met by officers of the law who placed them in handcuffs. Authorities set these accused illegal predators up using an online ad that explicitly offered sexual services by children at a hotel in Homestead, Florida. In their advertisement, officials posed as a mother who was prostituting her own 2 daughters who were advertised as being between the ages of 13 and 15 years old, and these pervy pedos jumped at the chance to rape these fictional little girls. And that was thankfully their undoing before any real children got harmed, presumably. The Daily Wire reported that, unsurprisingly, many of these arrested illegal foreigners had rap sheets, which we will circle back around to, and several of them had been deported out of our country before, only to come back where they were not wanted, not welcome, and not legally allowed to be. In total, law enforcement arrested 12 male pedos between the ages of 22 and 51 years old. They were all arrested on charges of child sex trafficking, and 5 of them were in the United States illegally, according to the authorities. According to NBC Miami, these pedos allegedly paid between $300 and $800 for the chance to engage in various kinds of sex acts with these advertised female children. Miami's state attorney, Catherine Fernandez Rundle, characterized the fact that this operation got any bites as being the best evidence of how we know these predators exist. We know that they're seeking out our young, our minors. These predators were intending to buy minors, and we were able to intervene before there was any victim to really rescue. The Department of Homeland Security told the Daily Wire that one of the accused illegal foreigners was Armando Martinez Cerron, a national of Mexico, who is a repeat criminal with prior arrests for both cocaine and DUI. Martinez Cerron first crossed our border illegally in 1999, and we kicked him out twice. Which is why I am serious when I say that I am in favor of the death penalty for a third-time invasion offense. If you want to stop it, there are ways to stop it. It's just a matter of whether you want to stop it badly enough to do what it takes. For me, the answer is yes, because no one is making them come back a third time. These are bad people that we do not want here. We have a right to kick them out. And if they know full well that coming back is going to carry a severe penalty, they will not do it. And if they do, At least you still have a mechanism for protecting the innocent people who are not breaking onto other people's property and committing sex crimes against their children. Moving on. The second Mexican illegal, Daniel Guadalupe Ruberio Pelcastre, is also an alleged repeat offender who was previously arrested for domestic violence and battery, according to DHS. He was also deported twice, first in November of 2012 and then just 1 month later in December of 2012. Meanwhile, Pantaleon Mendez Ortega, a national of Guatemala, has been living in the United States illegally for over 2 decades, and who knows how many children he has victimized while here after breaking into the United States in May of 2000, because you don't just wake up one day and decide to become a pedo. His criminal record includes endlessly endangering our neighbors during multiple arrests for drunk driving on our streets, which is when he should have been deported for making this country more dangerous and a worse place. His fellow Guatemalan illegal, Alex Gilberto Pastor Perez, has been living here in violation of our laws since March of 2015, and he has had an outstanding deportation order out on him ever since July of 2017, according to DHS. Yet 9 years later, here he still is. Nicholas Diego Rosalin, another Guatemalan who crossed our border illegally in May of 2019, was ordered to be deported by a judge in April of 2025, yet here he is, sexually preying on little girls. A DHS spokesperson told the Daily Wire that ICE agents did assist the local authorities with this sting, adding that under President Trump and Secretary Mullen, criminal illegal aliens are not welcome in the United States. As for the pedos, these 12 suspects now face felony charges that include the human trafficking of minors under the age of 18. But we've had a lot of positive and heartwarming stories from the normies out there this week, so let's end with one more. To celebrate America's fast approaching 250th anniversary, 2 marathon runners have assembled a team of athletically minded patriots to unite this country in a relay marathon that will pass the torch from sea to shining sea, and that torch, that beacon of light, is our glorious flag. This unifying idea all got started when 2 marathon runners named Joe Nail and Wyatt Moss met and became friends while trying to complete 50 marathons, one in each of the 50 U.S. states. Their Relay for America website states, as America's 250th birthday came into view, Joe had an idea. Do something epic to bring the country back together. A coast-to-coast relay carrying the American flag from one ocean to the Capitol. He asked Wyatt to partner, and Wyatt pushed it further. Don't make it a private feat. Open it to everyone and build the first mass participation flag relay across the country. That was how the idea for the Relay for America event was born. A marathon where more than 250 runners will carry our flag from California all the way to the nation's capital, passing it from patriotic hand to patriotic hand. Mr. Nail and Mr. Moss have mapped out a meaningful route consisting of 3,016 miles, and each of those miles will be dedicated to one of America's heroic veterans. Their website explains that you don't have to wait for the perfect set of circumstances to arrive before you get active and do something special. After all, this great idea for unifying joy all started with a ragtag group of young people on a shoestring budget with about 2 weeks to plan something most would spend years and hundreds of thousands of dollars on. Yet despite the ambitiousness of their project, action and agency won out. As its founders pointed out, that it is the spirit of American exceptionalism that kept their team going, ultimately leading to success, as it does tend to do so often. During a Fox News interview, Mr. Nails said unashamedly, "We think that America is still an exceptional place. There's this narrative. People like to talk about all the things that are wrong with America, and really the spirit of this relay is showing all the things that are right with America." Meanwhile, Mr. Moss told his audience on Instagram that the challenge was officially underway as the run began last Sunday on a beach in San Francisco, where a group of about 15 people who were accompanying the official runner all touched the water of the Pacific Ocean and started running east. The homepage of the Relay for America has a map where viewers can see the flag's current location, follow along in the journey to be a part of what our neighbors are doing, and calculate the time that the flag will reach their state if they want to turn out in person to cheer on their fellow Americans. The website also offers opportunities for volunteers to work for management, media, comms, operations, press, and bookkeeping to make sure that the flag reaches the nation's capital by July 4th. So have some fun and get involved. The runners are currently averaging about 161 miles per day, running around the clock. So right now, the entire relay is slated to take around 20 days, ending in Washington, D.C. on the evening of July 2nd, giving them a slight pad to make sure that the unexpected doesn't make them late for the 4th. As of Friday, the flag had been carried all the way to Utah. That's it for me this week. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, I would ask you to please help me build this podcast into a success by clicking the like and follow buttons, because that is what does the trick in making these things successful, and it doesn't cost anything to do. And I hope that you come back again next week. Until then, have a good week, my friends.